Hi, this is János, it is Real World Audio, and we are looking at something very important for us audiophiles, and that is sound pressure levels. What are the levels we are listening to music, and how does that relate to bass perception, high frequency perception, and basically all of this was inspired by Amazonas Biotope's post. You also know him as Optimize, but nowadays YouTube is mixing up all the names with these, I don't know. I don't know how it works, but I often get mixed up because sometimes like people get shown by their names and other times by at email or at a name. So it's that change that YouTube made just made things very confusing. And anyway, just back to the post here. So Amazonas Biotope brings up this very, very important question about the playback levels and how the brain perceives bass and sound. And I really agree with you that people are not paying enough attention to these subjects, and he has brought up this issue several times before, and there were a few commenters who chimed on, but I do agree far less than the subject deserves. So that's why now I try to make actually a 3-series little video to expand on this subject, and I really hope I can see through these before getting sidetracked. And so this first video will be about loudness, how loud is loud, and where does fatigue kick in. So what is basically the highest of the range that an audiophile shall listen to music without damaging his or her ears. So if we want to, our ears are the most important part of our stereo system, and that's the number one component we all must maintain, because if we don't maintain our hearing, we don't pay attention to it, we don't pay number one attention to our ears, we just play around with their toys, just randomly turning the volume up. It's not going to pay out. All it will give you is a hearing aid in the future, and the ability to listen to high quality sound in the future will be lost irrevocably. So that's why every audiophile's number one criteria should be your own ears and hearing. So to get the fundamental grasp on that is to understand fatigue, what causes listening fatigue, what are safe listening levels, and this will be my video today. The next video will be about the Fletcher-Munson curves, which is the difference between how humans hear versus how a microphone records the sound. So when you analyze a system through oscilloscope measurements or just any kind of measurements that you do, THD measurements, whatnot, you are using the measurement that how a computer works, how a calculator works, which is absolutes, but that's not how the brain works. So if you are planning any kind of strategies on how to optimize your system, if you are planning based on the absolute scale that measurements use, you are bound to fail. And actually Amazonas Biotope, he explained it briefly why you will fail like that. Actually this is at the core of it, and when we expand it, we look more into the technology, into the biology. You can find this when you look at the difference between the traditional computing versus the neuronal processors, how they work. That's where we can start. So I think that's also a whole series of videos to get into that matter. What's the difference between human perception and machine perception, and Anyway, so that's where we kind of get started with the next episode, and in the third episode, that's where we get into the meat of what we see here, how the loudness curves work out, and how when you change the volume, the perception of a mid-range compared to bass and compared to high frequencies, how does it change, and how does it change your perception of music, and is it a good idea or not to adjust loudness? Because as you remember, in the older days there was a loudness switch in the amplifiers, and that's where I will get into how does that work, what kind of solutions you can use, which are high quality solutions in your audio system, and what are safe for your hearing, and which are the solutions that will almost practically guarantee that you will suffer severe hearing loss if you follow up on with those solutions. So right now, without further ado, let's get here. Ta-da! Magic is happening. Is it happening? No, it's not happening. Why isn't it happening? Now it should have changed my power here. There it is. Bingo. All right. So basically, fatigue and exposure. So wherever, this should have been my title anyway. Now here we are. So how the brain calculates loudness. So when we have listening fatigue, it's not because that it's physically too loud that is breaking your ear. No, it's because it's tiring your auditory system. So the neurons are, and then the processing center, as the lower level processing centers for the sound are getting overloaded, and that's your fatigue. Listening fatigue is your brain telling you that I'm receiving too much information, I can't handle it. And why is that happening? That's because the auditory system is one of the key survival systems that we depended on to survive, because we needed to be able to hear what goes on around us, because we can see right here in front of us, but what's behind you, or if it's dark, what's happening. To be able to process it meant like the difference between life and death. And when there's too much noise around you, then that's your brain telling you that I'm not safe anymore. You are in danger, because I cannot verify what's going on. And also fatigue is your brain's way of telling you that your auditory system is being compromised already. And if you perceive fatigue while listening to an audio system, it means you immediately must bring the volume down, or if you cannot, you are at a friend's party, that's your time to get your earplugs and plug in your ears. Don't be afraid to look like a fool. Protect your ears, because if you don't, then you will be the fool who will need a hearing aid 10 years later. So that's the difference between you needing hearing aid 10 or 20 years from now, is whether you listen to your body when it tells you that I had enough. From now on, we are in danger zone. So that's when you have listening fatigue. That's your alarm going on in your brain that you had enough and you must do something immediately. It's not like, oh, I have fatigue, so maybe I listen to maybe like half an hour more, but then you are chatting with your buddies and it turns to an hour, 2 hours, and then next day you feel that, ooh, it was too much. And then you go do these listening parties, listening sessions, and then 10, 20 years later you just notice, well, now I need a hearing aid. And that's because your body was telling you that I'm done, I'm toast, we need change immediately. And then that's the best advice you can ever get, I think, is that when you experience that, then just protect your ears. If you don't have anything else, just get a piece of tissue, plug it in your ears. That's better than nothing. or if it's like really bad, you feel that's now really hurting your ears, just leave the room and just tell people, "Oh, I'm sorry, I have a headache or my ears hurt or something." Don't overdo it. Yeah. So anyway, so that's how our body is telling us that it's too loud. And the dB measurements, they are absolutely nonsense, meaningless compared to that, because these dB measurements about the curves, how the brain hears what might be the danger zone, how much, where you will get hearing damage, that's there's just so much individual variation on that. It's just an average, and you might be much more sensitive than the average, or you might be much less sensitive than the average. And it's not just the plain dB value, but a lot of the upper harmonic distortion that tires your ear, because the most processing power that the brain needs to analyze the sound you are hearing is the very high frequency content, like 10 kilohertz and up. And when that range is overloaded and there's distortion in that range because your amplifier is driven hard, it's getting into distortion, your driver is getting hard, getting into distortion. And this is especially true for solid state amplifiers, which have very high order harmonic distortion components to it. And especially like if you can hear like 17 kilohertz or higher, then for all of you listening to the majority of solid state amplifiers, when they are nearing, when they have a healthy output at a loud listening level, it's just pure pain, physical torture. Even many of the high quality ones, it's torture. Of course, there's a solid state amps that when you have really good hearing you can still listen to, but they have the tendency to get these distortion spectra, which are the real danger, very, very dangerous for the human ear, that make your ear much more tired and will make you lose the ability to hear those very high frequency registers. And by the way, the loudness is not perceived by the human ear as an absolute value. It's perceived as a ratio of sounds. So the brain is always comparing the sounds to something, and that's how you get the perception of loudness. And eventually the ear, how you think how loud the sounds are, they are mostly based on the mid-range. So the level of the mid-range, that's what your brain thinks how loud the music is. So if the level of the mid-range is let's say at 80 dB, then if compared to that you still have bass that's like 130 dB, your brain still thinks you are listening at 80 dB. And you think it's safe to crank the volume up at that level. However, it's not safe, because with that extreme overload in the bass, you are going to damage your hearing. And sadly, there is absolutely no attention whatsoever on hearing damage in the bass region. All of the audiophiles are exclusively talking about hearing damage for high frequencies. But what I have noticed among my friends is that the hearing loss for the bass registers is at least as bad as the hearing loss in the high registers, and I dare say even worse, much worse. Or hearing deteriorates much more in the low frequencies than anywhere else. And but people usually don't, there's just no awareness about that, because it's very easy. You just crank up the subwoofer level, or you add one more sub, bring up the levels, and oh, okay, I can hear bass again. But anyway, so now let's just get back to what how you get tired from listening to music. One of them is that, of course, your ear will take the mid-range as the level that you are listening to, and that's what you think is the safe level. And it might be safe if the highs and lows are approximately at the same energy level. And if they are much higher level than the mid-range, so there's a big loudness curve applied to it, then you are fatiguing your ear just as badly as if you are listening with the mid-range in level with the highs and the lows. And so this is one big component. And of course, the second component is the high frequencies. If there is the slightest distortion in the high frequencies, if the high frequencies are already at a high sound pressure level that you consider it as loud, they're even just adding a little bit of distortion to those high frequencies will accelerate the fatigue tremendously. And oh, I'm missing a T there, distortion. I got a stuck letter. Oh, my keyboard got stuck there. Okay. What else? So let's go to the next slide. Okay. So I think everyone has heard of the NIOSH exposure levels. What is that? This is from CDC's website, and this is the standard for noise exposure. So if you are an employer and you have a company where a lot of noise is being made, these are the limits, the official limits. If you expose your employees to this much loudness level for this much time, or a cumulative of that, then you must provide hearing protection for them, because these levels exposing for this number of hours has been proven to create hearing damage, permanent hearing loss. So, and this is about daily exposure leading to hearing damage. But I would say, to me, these numbers are not good enough. So if you use these numbers, that's enough for you. Exposing you to this much damage is enough, so you can talk to your friends and talk to people. But if you want to lead an audiophile way or a musician way, and be able to enjoy music to its fullest, and that it's, the richness that music is presented to you, then this is by far too much. This is way too much. You are going to get as much hearing damage that you are going to miss out at least 3/4 of the information content that's in the music. So what is this? So as you see, let's start here at each of the levels. It says like 82 dBA. So it's like a scale measurement, which means 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz. This is being measured. So it excludes anything above 20 and below 20. So it means that if for 16 hours you can listen to 82 dB without having hearing damage. No, you cannot. I think that's yeah, you will not go absolutely deaf if for 16 hours you are exposed to this much noise, but I can tell you 82 dBA for 2 hours, I can feel it that my ears are tired as hell. Yeah, next day I can recover, I'm okay, but if every day I would get exposed to 82 dBA for 2 hours, which is 8 times less than the NIOSH limit, I would be struggling and I would be developing tinnitus, really bad tinnitus. And the scale, as you see, with 3 dB addition, so when you up the exposure by 3 dB, the time allowed by NIOSH gets halved. So it means that you can be exposed to half as much time and you still get the same amount of hearing damage. And as you see, when we are at 91 dBA, so if you are listening to music of average volume of 91 dB, if you do that for longer than 2 hours, you are going to get hearing damage. And in these 2 hours, it's not just your stereo, it's your whole entire day's cumulative exposure is there. So that's why you must be aware that if, for example, if you are driving on the highway to work, you drive there for an hour, you get exposed to about 82 dB, 85 dB already, or even more, maybe 90 dB. And then you already, maybe you have 1 hour left, and that was just the highway driving. And then you spend like 8 hours in your building, and there your air conditioning might be, the central ACs that we have in the buildings, they have a really loud, very low frequency components to them that can be 70, 80 dB or higher. That also adds to this. And by the time you get to listen to your stereo, there are odds that you already are past your NIOSH limits if you live in a big metropolis. If you live somewhere in the countryside, no neighbors, just birds along, then you probably have negligible exposure and you can crank up the volume safely. But if you live in New York downtown or something like that, or like here in Honolulu, going through the highway, no, you are just exposing yourself to so much noise and damage that the time left for your stereo to crank it up is really minimal. The only thing you can do about it is use hearing protection. So for example, I have these closed headphones, so I put them on, and this helps to protect my hearing, to cut off the noises. And when I drive, I also put on headphones. Actually, those are just ear protection devices. They're the 3M industrial protection gear, and it does help a lot. So I used to have really bad tinnitus, and driving like that did help. And nowadays I only have tinnitus when I have really bad exposure during the daytime, driving too much without ear protection. If I drive without ear protection for a week or two, then yes, my tinnitus is coming back with a vengeance and a really strong bite. So that's why these exposure levels are really important to think about, but don't think about it as the gospel, because you might be more sensitive, much more sensitive than what these figures tell us. Or if you already have hearing damage, then if you listen to this much, you get exposed to this much noise, this much sound, then you're still fine. You won't notice any change because you already lost a lot of your hearing. And when it's damaged, it means that your ear thinks that what you are hearing is much quieter than what it is. So basically, your threshold for minimum sound, the window where you hear, is moving higher and higher. So when we get hearing damage, in a lot of cases, that's what's happening, that your window to hear sounds moves up a lot of dBs higher. And especially, and it does not move higher equally, so like mid-range, bass, and then high frequency, they don't move up together, but they move up in a curve, like the Fletcher-Munson curves. They curve up. Mid-range is in the bottom, and the bass and the top are up. And as you get hearing damage, that's what happens, that those curves just became even more emphasized. So going back here, so this is the NIOSH guideline, and I just added some extra notes here for audiophiles and music lovers, what happens beyond 100 dBA, because that's where it stops. But of course there are much louder sounds than that, and if you use a jackhammer, for example, you are getting way higher than 100 dBA. Or if you have like airplane, like jets flying above you, then you are getting way higher than 130 dB exposure. So it's a good idea to have more scale than that, to go higher than 100 dB with the allowed NIOSH allowed time of exposure at that level. So what does that mean? In the audiophile world, that's what we hear, that 102 dB capable loudspeakers are the ones that are the golden goal. So when you have 102 dBA, then that's what is 102 dB capable system. So like your speaker's efficiency times the output of the amplifier equals 102 dB or more. That's when you can get like a live volume level. Of course, that's kind of an exaggeration, because some live sounds music goes way louder than that, but it's enough that you get an impression or illusion of a pretty good liveness. Of course, if you already have hearing damage, that's not enough, way not enough to have a feeling of live music. But if you have kept your ears in tip-top shape, if you are a young adult, then 102 dB is way more than enough for you to have a complete feel of the music. If you are an adult, especially a male in your 60s, then it's probably more than about the 120 dB. Is that what you want to have a feel like, wow, you are young again? Yeah, I can hear the music when it's 120 dB. But tell it to your grandkids, because they will say, I'm going deaf, turn it down. I'm still young, I still have my ears. But you might be already at that level that you need 118 dBs to play at. But that's a lot. That's a very tight call for any stereo system. Of course, nowadays we can get loud sound pressure levels by Class D amps and cheap PA speakers, but the quality of that is usually very questionable. But anyway, so as you see, the allowed time of exposure as the sound SPL increases drastically gets very low. So if you are at, let's say, 112 dB, you have less than 1 minute to listen at that energy level. And if you do more than that, you will get hearing damage. And just relating to you guys, a couple of days ago, in one of the videos, I had this mentioning that I had unfortunately, I had my volume kind of cranked up, and I had the Netflix logo this distance from the Altec woofer. It's like doo-doo, like the Netflix coming in, and that was at approximately 100 dB level at that distance from my ear, and it was about maybe like 2 seconds or so. And as you see, the exposure at that volume allowed is 0.75 seconds, and I exceeded that by like 2-3 times, right? About. And yes, I can report that after that, for 2 days, I was half deaf for my ear, which got exposed to that sound. So yes, these numbers here, this scale is to be taken seriously. And if it says like less than 1 second, I say, oh wow, 2-3 seconds, what difference does it make? It makes all the difference when the sound is this loud. So I think I'm going to start now, because I'm hitting half an hour. And as my last message, just please be very careful with your ears. We got only 2 of them, and just wear ear protection when you need it, and just have an awesome, amazing time listening to music, live or recorded. Bye bye.